Now we're going to show laying down points. Start by using the slider on the bottom to move the video to the beginning. In the menu in the upper middle, switch from origin and scale to points. Just tap it. Now we're going to want to pick a spot on the object that we're going to follow throughout the whole video. So on a car, I'm going to pick the tire because it's the easiest. I'm going to center that target or donut right over the tire. Now, look to the right of the target. You can see really faintly, it's kind of faint, so you may have to look close, a slider. It slides up and down. And you can use that slider to make the target the exact size of whatever you're going to follow in your video. So I'm going to slide that in and out to make it the exact size of the hubcap. And then I'm going to make sure it's centered. Now we're going to tap the center of the circle to drop a point. And watch. As this happens, there'll be a red dot that appears, and it will automatically advance the video one frame. Move the donut to the hubcap and tap the center again. It'll drop a point and advance one frame. Move the donut, tap the center. It will automatically advance for you just one frame, and we're just going to keep tapping the center and then moving the donut. Just going to keep doing that until we've collected a few points. All right, and you can use those buttons at the bottom to advance it all the rest of the way, or you can back it up. And as I'm showing here, you can back it up to any spot you want. You don't have to do it just one frame at a time. So I showed kind of jumping ahead there a few, and then I'm going to tap and drop and tap and drop. In this case, I am advancing 2 frames. So if you look on the bottom, there's a button down there that allows you to advance 2 frames. So there's 1 frame, there's 2 frames. So these points that I'm laying down right now are 2 frames apart. And that's okay. We're going to see the data here in a moment. Okay, now we want to view our graphs. So we're going to tap the button in the upper right that looks like a graph, and it will pop up our graphs. This first graph is Y on the y-axis and X on the x-axis, and it's really not very interesting. We're not going to use it in this lab. Notice those Y values. I want to point out how small those are, and we expect that because it's not really moving in the Y direction. Swipe left, and we'll go to the next set of graphs. All right, so the next we're going to see are 2 graphs. The top is displacement in the x direction versus time, and the bottom is the velocity in the x direction versus time. And let's just go ahead and peek. We'll swipe again here in a moment, and we'll look at the Y motion. Now the Y motion isn't interesting in this particular situation. We'll do other labs where it is relevant, but in this case, we're really just going to focus on the X displacement and that X velocity graph. So let's just swipe and get back to the X graphs, X displacement and X velocity. In this lab, you are going to have 3 videos. You're going to have one with constant positive velocity, one with 0 velocity, and one with constant negative velocity. So what does constant velocity mean? Constant velocity means that if we were to look at the velocity versus time graph, the slope would be 0. All right, so I'm looking at this bottom graph, and I like the last 4 points there. Those look pretty close. They're not exactly, but they look pretty close to 0 slope. But I don't like those first 3 points, so I'm going to fix that. I'm going to close the graph up. Then I'm going to go to my first 3 points there, and I'm just tapping on them and delete. I go to each of those first 3 points I dropped and delete and I go back to my graph. Now, in looking at the bottom of these two graphs, that's my x velocity versus time graph, I can see that it is essentially zero slope. Now, I know it looks like, if you look closely at this, you can see there is some slope to it, but look at the units on the left. The bottom is 6.93 and the top is 6.97. So there's hardly any rise for my run in terms of the slope on this graph. So it's close to zero. And something else I want to note is so it's constant. It's constant at about 6.95 and it's positive.